Perfect. For the public at home, we're just waiting for a few folks to pile in for the public at home.
Do you remember me?
Of course. I'm Tom. You're the
Tom,
one,
hi, I'm Bob.
public contributor.
That's it, yes. Say, who are you? They remember me.
Of course. It's just me. We know exactly who you are. All right, we gave everyone 2 extra minutes. It's fine. Yep.
And thanks to the city for doing this again. This is really a.
5. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And actually,
You've got a lot of things to do.
Well,
Great things.
I'm going to slide this way because I've already seen this. And I'm not in it, but we did try AI, so.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, you ready? Thank you all very much, and welcome to the FY27 budget. I want to thank the folks that are here today, and obviously all the folks at home that will be watching this. This is going to be on LTC Live, as well as for the future. But this is 1 out of 5 that we're going to be having, and that's 5 organized budget sessions that we're going to have, and we possibly will have more when we go to the neighborhood groups. So today, what we're learning about is a budget session. What we did put forth is an AI version. Excellent. Yeah, an AI version of a 10-minute video of the basics of budgeting for everybody to handle, look at, and see what they think. Some of the folks that are here, maybe at the end of the event, you can tell us if you liked it or if you didn't like it, because we are trying to get everything a little bit more recorded, so we then can put it into different languages. So this is one of our first efforts to do this. We did this during the State of the City address, and from the other 4 languages that we included, we got a great great reviews on it. So that being said, I should have probably introduced myself. My name is Tom Golden, City Manager here in the City of Lowell. To my left would be your right would be Connor Baldwin, who is Assistant City Manager and Financial Operator, Chief Financial Operator. And then I have Austin Ball, who is the Assistant CFO to Mr. Baldwin. So today we're going to once again be talking about the basics, the Lowell budget overview, the challenges, the history of our budget, which is probably one of the most important things, and how we're budgeting how we're developing our budget. It is a little bit earlier than we typically would go for, but we think that it's important from the administration's perspective as well as the council's perspective to have this completely voted on, hoping by the end of May. Therefore, our department heads will have June to get ready for July 1. Years past, it's always been at the last 2 weeks, I think, last 3 weeks of June, which kind of puts our department heads in a little bit of a scramble over the following weeks. So at this point, I'm going to kick it over to Mr. Baldwin. I do apologize. You will see me sneak out of here in a few moments, and we welcome everyone to please come in. I want to say thank you very much to Mayor Gitche for being here, Councilor Duran, who just joined us as well, and Mr. Baldwin, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, and welcome and good evening, everybody. So again, this is the first of several budget listening sessions that we will be having. Tonight's agenda will watch a video that we put together that runs through some of the specific challenges and highlights for the coming year. It will also be food for thought for those here or those watching at home, so that it may generate some thoughts or questions, and then we'll leave time at the end for question and answer, which I hope to be sort of the meat of what we're doing here, to hear from you. Anybody who may be watching this at home or online on LTC, we invite all of you to send an email to the budget office if there's something you want us to know, or we invite you to join us next time if you're unable to today. So we apologize that the snow may have prevented some of the folks from joining us today, although the streets are clearing. It is still right on the eve of a pretty significant storm, so hopefully by the time next month we do the next listening session on capital debt and our capital improvements, we'll be able to get a bit of a larger crowd in person. However, as I mentioned, anybody who may be watching this online or at home, we invite those to send an email either to my Deputy CFO, Mr. Ball, at his email address, aball@lowellma.gov, or myself, cbaldwin@lowellma.gov. Please let us know what you think, what your concerns are. We're going to give in the video a little bit of background about where we are in the budget process, what are some of the steps in front of us, what is the legal framework for the budget, and then a little bit of 101, so to speak, on where does the revenue come from, what are our major expenditures, and then a piece looking at the year ahead. So I will then give it to Mr. Ball to dive into the weeds a little bit more, but Mr. Ball, if we're ready, let's begin the video.
Welcome to the Mayor's Reception Room at Lowell City Hall for tonight's FY27 Budget Public Listening Session. Our goal: to share the numbers, challenges, and opportunities shaping our city's financial future. Meet your budget team: City Manager Thomas A. Golden Jr., Chief Financial Officer Connor Baldwin, and Deputy CFO Austin Ball. Together, we ensure accountability and transparency for Lowell's finances. Tonight's agenda: the basics of city budgeting, Lowell's budget overview and history, current fiscal challenges, the FY27 budget outlook, and opportunities for your engagement. Lowell's budget process is values-focused, fiscally responsible, and designed for efficient government. The city manager, council, and residents all play a role in shaping spending decisions. The general fund is fueled by real estate taxes, state aid, like Chapter 70 and UGA, and local receipts. Most spending supports staffing, supplies, and capital improvements. Massachusetts law requires balanced budgets, no deficit spending. Every dollar is allocated with transparency, capital planning, and accountability to support core services. As the City of Lowell begins planning for the FY 2027 budget, several significant fiscal pressures are emerging that will require strategic management and careful prioritization. These challenges span both revenue constraints and escalating expenditures, and they underscore the need for a comprehensive and disciplined approach to budgeting in the coming fiscal year. On the revenue side, the city anticipates limited growth in unrestricted general government aid, UGA, from the Commonwealth. While this aid has historically served as a critical offset to fixed costs, current state budget constraints and economic uncertainty suggest that increases will be modest at best. Compounding this issue is the loss of Host Community Agreement, HCA, revenue from cannabis establishments, following recent regulatory changes enacted by the Cannabis Control Commission. Additionally, the city is experiencing a decline in investment income, driven by market volatility and lower interest rates, which further constrains available resources. On the expenditure side, the city faces a series of substantial cost increases, a sharp rise in the pension assessment, reflecting updated actuarial assumptions and the need to address the city's long-standing unfunded pension liability. Health insurance premiums through the Group Insurance Commission, GIC, are projected to increase significantly, adding pressure to the operating budget. The charter school assessment continues to grow, diverting resources from the city's education budget and placing additional strain on municipal finances. General inflationary pressures are driving up the cost of utilities, electricity, heating fuel, and gasoline, materials, and contracted services. Our budget is informed by consensus, integrating community input, council priorities, and performance data to ensure accountability and effective spending. Department heads estimate costs to maintain current service levels, considering salary trends and operational efficiencies. Every budget is built from the department level up. The FY27 budget process follows a timeline set by state law, Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 32, whereby the city manager must deliver a balanced budget to the city council within 170 days of their annual organization. From here, the following internal timeline is underway. January 26th to February 13th. Finance Department works with departments to complete budgets. March 23rd to March 27th. CFO, budget staff, and/or city manager may meet with department heads to discuss departmental budgets. March 28th to May 1st. Final budget preparation. Additional listening sessions will be offered as follows. 1. March 10th, 2026, 5 to 6 p.m. Debt discussion. 2. March 24th, 2026, 5 to 6 p.m. DPW. 3. April 7th, 2026, 5 to 6 p.m. DPD. 4. April 21st, 2026, 5 to 6 p.m. Public Safety. Finally, the major budget milestones, legislative/city council are first public reading, May 5th, 2026, and public hearing, May 19th, 2026. Property taxes are a major revenue source, but Lowell's levy limit and actual tax levy remain below the maximum allowed by Proposition 2.5. The property tax levy remains the city's most significant and stable source of revenue. The final FY 2026 levy was $188,283,700.51. For FY 2027, the city anticipates a minimum increase of 2.5%, with the potential to raise the levy by up to 5%, depending on expenditure pressures and policy decisions. This range reflects allowable growth under Proposition 2.5 and anticipated new development. Even with ongoing cost-cutting measures, a levy increase closer to 5% may be necessary to meet rising fixed costs, including health insurance, contractual obligations, and charter school tuition assessments. Lowell's average property tax bill is $5,844, well below the statewide average of $8,112, helping keep the city affordable for residents. Unlike most Massachusetts cities, Lowell receives just 40% of revenue from local taxes. Over 50% comes from state and local aid, making state funding critical. Federal funding, such as community development funds for our nonprofit partners and K-12 grants, face reductions and less predictability, increasing pressure on state and local resources. The ARPA program sunset in 2026 will impact certain grant-funded positions and initiatives. These are being evaluated for absorption into the general fund or phased out to maintain structural balance. Departments relying on ARPA for personnel or programmatic support have been directed to submit transition plans as part of FY27 budget requests. The city of Lowell received approximately $76 million in American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds. And from the outset, the administration took great care to ensure these dollars were used for one-time investments rather than ongoing operational costs. This approach safeguarded the city's long-term fiscal stability by avoiding structural reliance on temporary federal funding. Investments were strategically directed toward critical needs such as technology upgrades, infrastructure improvements, and short-term staffing enhancements to address pandemic-related challenges. Among these investments, temporary personnel positions were created to stabilize operations impacted by COVID-19, including roles in finance, elections, public health, and technology. These positions were always intended to be short-term, and staff were informed of their temporary nature upon hiring. As ARPA funding sunsets, these roles will conclude in FY27, resulting in a reduction of positions and corresponding budget adjustments across departments. This planned transition reflects the city's commitment to fiscal responsibility while leveraging federal resources to meet urgent community needs during the pandemic recovery period. Now, let's focus on the cost drivers for FY27. Pension obligations are up $2.7 million. Health insurance rates are rising 10.9%, and debt service increases by $2.8 million. Chapter 70. School aid sees a significant $14.5 million increase, while unrestricted government aid rises by only $782,000, creating an imbalance in available resources. Lowell's investment in schools is unique. In FY25, we exceeded net school spending by over $7 million and are projected to be $8 million over in FY26. Compared to Lawrence, Worcester, and Malden, who are all below NSS, Lowell stands in a category of its own for educational investment among gateway cities. The trade-off: increased school spending and fixed costs squeeze other city services. Inflation further strains a lean budget. FY27's general fund faces a projected $7.7 million gap just to cover known cost increases before any new programs are added. Department heads must submit level service budgets, itemizing every cost and avoiding new positions unless they yield long-term savings. Each department also prepares a 10% reduction plan. Every line item is tracked in our online tool, ensuring transparency and allowing departments to tell a unified, citywide story. Community priorities drive budget decisions. Your feedback, tonight and throughout the year, shapes how we allocate resources and protect core services. You can engage via public hearings in May and June by email, phone, or attending council meetings. All sessions are streamed and recorded for transparency. Transparency is our North Star. Every department's budget is public, and your questions and concerns are welcome at every stage. How will these financial decisions affect your family and neighborhood? Your questions and feedback are the foundation for Lowell's budget choices. You are partners in this process. Participation, tonight and in the months ahead, ensures Lowell's budget reflects your values and priorities. Let's build fiscal strength together. With your engagement, we'll make Lowell's budget work for everyone, today and for years to come.
All right. So, thank you.
This bra is for seniors who want to get back their youth.
So we, with the video, we're trying to set the stage, provide some information and some food for thought and for discussion. I hope that the takeaways from the video were that this coming fiscal 2027 budget is a challenging one for the city. It's not what every year is not without challenges, with its own challenges, but in 2027, the sunset, as the video mentioned, of the ARPA program, some of our fixed cost increases related to capital investments that have been made are especially difficult on pressures on the budget this year. So without further ado, we want to keep this conversational, and I do want to invite any of the members who are here to ask your questions, share your thoughts. I would only ask that if anybody wanted to share any information or ask any questions, that they step up to the podium so that they can use the microphone so that the folks at home can hear. If there aren't any questions, I'm happy to talk a little bit more about some specifics, although this session is supposed to be very broad in nature. We will, in the subsequent sessions, focus more on certain topical areas like capital and debt at the next one, the Department of Public Works and some of their operational expenditures, planning and development that will focus on some of the bigger picture items on the horizon for the city. And I'm forgetting one. Public safety, thank you. Police and fire, of course. So those are the major cost categories for the city. But before I go any further, I'd like to invite any of the members of the public who are here to please let us know what you think or ask us any questions. Please, yeah, step right up. There's no formal decorum.
Okay, I'm Leila Hall. I don't know if I need to introduce myself or not, but last time you gave us paper, and it was so easy to follow along last year when you had the budget.
Sure.
And today, when I was looking at it, it was saying a lot, but there was stuff moving in the background. Maybe that's just for me, but I was like, okay, what's going on?
Sure.
So it's easier for me if I could have the paper to look at it, as you go along. You really explained a lot of good things. You had the numbers from like the top and showed how you subtracted stuff. So that was easy for me. And today I was just kind of a little distracted by so much stuff. So. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's a relatively easy fix for us. We'll bring hard copies next time. We will also put copies of the presentation and some of the information on the budget department website. There are a couple of reports that have been given to the council, one in this current term and then one at the end of the last term that have a lot of the information. Do you remember those dates, Mr. Ball? Turn your microphone.
So it was February 17th and December 16th were the two reports that you can get that have a lot of this information that we covered tonight.
But we will bring hard copies. If you would care to share us your email before you leave, we could send you an email with some of the information. But that's a very good point, so thank you for sharing that. Please.
So first of all, I thought the AI-generated video was a pretty good one, outside of maybe the really old photo of the two of you guys and the city manager. But my question is around capital spend.
Sure.
With the budget being really tight, operational costs having to be really scrutinized, what's the city's plan for capital spend to continue a lot of that horizontal road work and stuff and park improvements over the next, usually you guys do, 5 years?
Yes, and that's a very good question that I'll answer in the following way. So our average annual authorization for capital over the since 2022 has been in the neighborhood of about $30 million a year. So that is new money that has been authorized that can be borrowed against. And I plan to get into the weeds a little bit more with debt next time, and we'll get into some of the specifics about how we pay for the big things. But for this next year, it is likely to be a scaled back version of the capital plan. In the last year, we authorized somewhere in the neighborhood, do you have the, yeah, can you slide that over here? I'll cite some examples of the 2025 capital budget. I'm sorry, 2026. We were able to make improvements to various firehouses. There was a $6 million investment by the city. There was another, and this has been sort of a steady cadence that the city has been on in investing in Colley Stadium and the Martin Sports Complex. So for the last several years, we've invested $2 million per year. There's a training facility that is underway. We have a contractor under contract now, but the $2 million annual allocation has gotten us there. In the Department of Public Works overall, so these are broken down by categorical area, $13.8 million was authorized for various capital needs, some of the single items, and I realize I'm not answering your question yet. I'm not trying to avoid that. The Pawtucket School roof was authorized for $5 million. Improvements to the Jeanne d'Arc School, which we now call the new 80-day school, $4 million. Improvements to schools like the gym replacement at the Riley, as well as capital improvements to the parking lots, which has been a successful program for the city. We had the Robinson, Bartlett, and Merkland on the future schedule. We've been able to do the Pine Arts, the Riley School, and I believe the Daily Bailey was another parking lot more recently that was replaced. So with the $30 million allocation, and there are others, horizontal roadways being sort of the biggest other category, we're going to have to scale that back, which is the answer to your question, and that is to absorb, number one, the debt service from these capital improvements that have been authorized. It doesn't constrain our ability to continue to spend against prior authorization. So if you're to think of it like a credit card, when the city council authorizes the city manager to borrow money in the capital budget, it's an authorization similar to how you would have a new credit card with a new balance on it. Now, we only pay the debt service or the principal and interest payments related to that capital on what we spend. And so it's not until we go pay the contractor for the work that we then have to pay it back. So just because we authorize, for instance, $12 million in building improvements, we're not paying that back all right away. But I hope that my description can illustrate how there's a cascading effect on the debt service budget, which is an operational item. And so the two different budgets, the operating budget and the capital budget, are linked to each other in the debt service budget. So debt service is paid by the operating budget in the same way that the annual operating costs for the departments, salary and wages, other ordinary expenses are paid. And so, there are outside of just the capital budget, there are other capital improvements that the city makes. The number one item that comes to mind is the Lowell High School project. And so, the Lowell High School project, other MSBA capital improvements through the accelerated repair program, they are not included in the capital budget, but they are paid for by the debt service budget on the local share of each project, the same as any other project. And so, for the various successful ARP projects in 2021 and 2022, those are the authorization year, but we're just finishing up the actual work on those projects. The debt service for the local share will come online soon. And so, again, it's a good question. There's a very long answer, and I'm trying to keep it as concise as possible. But because of the debt service impact from these prior capital projects, we will have to constrain new authorization until such a time that older capital starts to come offline. And that is typically our capital strategy, and I do plan, again, to get into this in more detail at the next session. But if you can think of it as a sort of a chart going from my right to your left, as the debt service that's on the books now starts to come down, we try to layer new debt service on so that it's roughly equal year to year. But even with that, things like the Lowell High School project have bumped that number up. So I believe when I started this job as the CFO, the debt service budget for the entire city for each year was somewhere in the neighborhood of $9 to $10 million. In FY 2027, it will be over $20 million. But most of that is for school building improvements. And of that component that's school building improvements, most of that is for the Lowell High School. And so that is with the new amendment that was passed, that's a $419 million price tag. And, sometimes we talk about these in the abstract or at the 50,000 foot level that it's like an 80-20 split. That is not necessarily how it works out because of the rules and regulations of the MSBA program. They don't just give you 80 cents on every dollar that you spend. It's based on reimbursable costs. It's based on which categories are reimbursable. It's based on certain caps on square footage for construction. And so that brings down that reimbursable rate to something a little closer to 60-40. And that 40% that's on the city is paid by the debt service budget. And it's worth noting, because I'm trying to get all this out at the same time, that those types of items are not creditable towards net school spending. Net school spending is this concept we think of in each year, what is the appropriate amount of money to spend on the school district, and that's a It's a figure that's codified in state law under the Education Reform Act. Every year, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education publishes a number for every district. There was a reference to that in the video. So they say that Lowell, in FY 2027, in order to meet net school spending, you have to spend, I'm guessing at the number, but it's in the neighborhood of $300 million. And then at the end of that year, a report is submitted to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education that gives them the actual cost. That is then audited by DESE and our outside auditors. And then they come back to each community and say, you met it, you didn't meet it, etc. In instances where it is not met, this may be an interesting factoid, you have to make it up on the next year. So there were many years where Lowell was under net school spending. And when that happens, if you miss it by $2 million, for example, you have to make up that $2 million on the next year. So again, I took your question to a whole different place, Mr. Faria, but thank you for the question. Are there other members of the public who'd like to ask us some questions or have any comments for us? Please, if you could step to the microphone, sir. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bob Bassett. I just have a general question about state funding for the schools. In the future, the next few years, do you see this? It seems that in the press, there really is a lot of press coming out from the state for increasing and putting an emphasis on funding the schools and all out throughout the state. Do you see that that's helping things getting better as time goes on, or is it becoming more restrictive in running the schools for the city of Lowell? And the second part of the question is, given at the federal level, the Department of Education is being completely redone, is it possible that in the future the federal block grants to the states will be larger and that Lowell may benefit from larger federal block grants to the states? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. So I will steer clear of politics in any of my responses, but try to address both of those questions because they're both very good questions relative to the finances of the city. Number one, about state funding. The city of Lowell, like other gateway cities, has seen an influx of state funding since 2019. And what happened in 2019 is that the legislature passed the Student Opportunity Act. It was the first major rehaul of education funding since the Education Reform Act of 1995, I think, or maybe 93. And what that has done has been a boon for gateway cities. Our colleagues in the towns and some of the smaller communities have a little bit of a different take on what has happened since then. And in deference to my colleagues in smaller towns, what I mean by that is that it has, in many communities, not like Lowell or Lynn or Lawrence or other gateway communities around the state, and that's a term you will likely hear me say several times at this session and future ones, but it's a defined term in the general laws of the Commonwealth. There are certain gateway communities, there's 20-something of them that were designated as such by the Commonwealth. There was funding attached to that, but you can imagine they're the Lowells, Lawrences, Hollyoaks, some of the former mill towns, et cetera, in Massachusetts where this designation all benefited somewhat equally. And, there are others. The city of Lynn last year had about a $20 million increase in their Chapter 70 funding. Lowell last year had a double digit. I don't know if you recall. It's more than this year, but in 2020, the increase 2026 to 27 is the 14.5 that was included in the governor's budget. The component of the Student Opportunity Act that is now become somewhat of a sticking point for the towns is that when the total required appropriation for the schools goes up, part of that net school spending formula and the Education Reform Act includes a required local contribution. And so in order to meet net school spending, Chapter 70 makes up one component of it, and then each community, each district is on the hook for the local contribution. And, some of our surrounding communities, Drakeit, for example, is one that I know, Tingsboro, are wrestling with this ability to meet that local contribution. And, what is compounding that issue for those towns, and I have worked in Lowell for almost all of my career, so Lowell is what I know. This is just what I'm told from friends and colleagues in other towns. They have a real limitation as it relates to Prop 2.5. And so in many of those communities, they're at their limit. Lowell has somewhere in the neighborhood of $12 million in excess levy capacity, and that's room between the amount that we tax, the levy, and what is known as the levy limit. And there was a reference to this in the video, but that difference between those two figures is what we call excess levy capacity. And that is how, in any particular year, Prop 2.5 sets two limitations on cities and towns. Not to get too academic about it, but number one is no community can tax more than 2.5% of its total full and fair cash value of all property. So if you can imagine, you take all the value of all of the buildings and personal property in any community, no community can ever tax more than 2.5% of the taxable value. That's number one. Number two is what folks are more familiar with, and that's the year-to-year limitation. And that limitation is you can't raise the levy more than 2.5% from one year to the next. But where excess levy capacity comes into play in that equation is, and this is what happened in Lowell in the early 2010s, that there were a number of years where Lowell did not tax 2.5%. And so what happens when a community chooses to tax less than the 2.5% is that money doesn't go away. It builds up this reserve of sorts called excess levy capacity. And so if in the past you can recall the city of Lowell having a 3.5%, or in 2023, 5.5% increase in taxes, that is possible because of this excess levy capacity. And in the towns, they don't have that. And so you can imagine their levy is right at the levy limit. And in order to tax above that, so if they need to meet their requirement for funding the schools, their local requirement, then they may need an override. So there is a procedure under the law for communities to go above that limit, but it requires a vote of the community. So usually that's a ballot referendum, et cetera. And that depends on the community and their wishes and what's being sold to them in terms of where those dollars are going to go. But in Lowell, we had built up over a number of years this excess levy capacity. That is part of how we're able to fund, when the high school project is all said and done and we're paying back the full debt service of the entire project. And when I say the entire project, I have these numbers committed to memory on the $380 million price tag. That's somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 or $9 million per year for 30 years, amortized at an interest rate of about 4%. The additional $36 million works out to another maybe $2.2 million per year or so. And so all of that we have in our excess levy capacity. So there was not a requirement when the council approved approved the loan order in 2019 or maybe 2020. We didn't need a debt exclusion, is my point. And so, sometimes when big school projects come before a smaller town or in a different municipality that may be at their limit, it requires either a debt exclusion or a Prop 2.5 override. That was not necessary in Lowell. We're able to pay for the debt service within our operating budget, but that does not mean it doesn't squeeze the other departments of the city. It is not still a burden. Lowell has we are very conscious in the administration. The council is very conscious of this, of the socioeconomic makeup of the city. And, the debate that we have, or the deliberations that go on in preparation for the budget, is what is that breaking point for the community? And that is a very real component of what we do. And that is, what we're looking for input from the community, because sometimes in order to afford one thing, it means we can't do another. And so this is a pluralist exercise, and not everybody's priorities can make it into the final budget. And so sometimes we have to sacrifice. Sometimes we have to try to find efficiencies to find ways to do the things that we're doing at a cheaper cost. Or sometimes for many years in Massachusetts, there was a push for regionalization. Can we work with our neighbors to try to do things more effectively, more efficiently? Those are all ways that we try to fit within the budget. But that was one part of your question. Please.
I guess what I was really trying to get at is, do you expect, is the state providing to the upside more money for the schools for Lowell than you expect? In other words, are you getting,
Yes.
the last couple of years, are you getting, you plan for a certain amount, and is the state contributing more
Sure.
to the upside than anticipated?
Got it.
When I read the press, it seems that the state is really trying hard to do that.
Yeah. Well, he already said it, so I got the, and I'll state it back into the microphone for those who may not have been able to hear it. So the question is, do we expect the same level of investment from the state, number one? Number two, is it a sufficient level of investment from the state? Or do we expect that amount to go up? So it is my understanding that we are reaching the end of the Student Opportunity Act commitment from the legislature. And so I know that in some of the statements made by the governor, one of her priorities and highlights from the FY 2027 state budget was her ability to meet the commitments under the Student Opportunity Act. And so I believe that the amount that was included for Lowell, although I have not done the math yet, but it is my understanding that that does meet the state's requirement towards the Student Opportunity Act. But like I said, I believe we're at the end of the road for Student Opportunity Act. Do I think that it has made a difference? Maybe is that a different way to say the question? Yes, it has. But I wanna reframe that a little bit. I am a parent of 2 children in the Lowell Public Schools, for what it's worth, so I have a vested interest outside of my day job. I love the Lowell Public Schools. I think about them a lot. I think about their funding a lot. What I'm trying to say here is there was a lot of learning loss that happened in COVID. My 2 daughters were home. It was a very difficult for my wife and I, as it was for many residents in the city. We have certain means to address that. Others do not, and I expect it was much more difficult for others who are less fortunate to address those areas of learning loss during COVID. So one of the things that the Student Opportunity Act came along in time to address, although I don't believe that it was legislatively intended to address this, was learning loss. And so one of the ways that the federal government came in to address that was through certain cash infusions. And number one on our side, or the city side, so to speak, was the American Rescue Plan Act. But on the school side, there was a similar version that was funded by the same federal pot of money, but it was called ESSER. And I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's ESSER, E-S-S-E-R. And that was for schools to address learning loss. Now, I have seen, and this is firsthand experience from my daughters, a certain cohort in the schools that, had to stay home for a certain period of time, and the scores have not reflected sort of a get back to the baseline. And so I do believe there is still a need for funding to address the learning loss that occurred during COVID. I don't believe that the Student Opportunity Act is sufficient to address that. But the other side of the coin is, there is a standard. There is a standard for funding the school districts. Lowell has exceeded that. So on its face, the answer to your question is yes, that Lowell's schools have enough money, but there is a completely separate context that can be considered, and that's whether there is enough, whether the formula adequately addresses the needs. And I'm not sure that it does. I'm not sure that Chapter 70, although I'm sure a lot of really smart people put that together in the 90s to come up with a fair number for each district. I'm not sure that it is the right number. So again, a long answer to a very good question. I hope it addresses some of the points. As to what the legislature will do, that's outside of my control and my what I know, but we will see. We will see.
And you think, and just an opinion, federal, do you think there'll be larger federal block grants in the future, given the Department of Education, federal level is?
Very, very difficult to say, and the question was about the federal funding and what does the city see or forecast in terms of our our medium, short-term, long-term prognosis for federal funding. I do see foresee or forecast reduction, not necessarily in CDBG. I think that of the different pots of money that the city is allocated each year, CDBG is one of the safer, although maybe not entirely safe. I will, from memory, sort of recount some of the other major federal awards, and those are largely in the schools. So a lot of the funding that's used to fund programs for students with disabilities, the IDEA grant, et cetera, those are all federally funded, come from the Department of Education, and any major restructuring of how that funding works or where it is allocated could impact the city of Lowell. We also use, through our community development office, other pots of revenue to address certain health and human service needs of the city, and those are, in DPD, they work together with either the health department or the police department. They all work together to address certain human service needs. I'm thinking of things like the co-op team. Folks at home or here may be familiar with the co-op and what they do, and if you're not familiar, it's a team. It's a interdepartmental team in the city, and Lowell is one of the first in our region and maybe the whole country to address things in this way. Very successful program. We're very proud of it, but it includes the police department, the fire department, the health department, the sheriff's office, and I'm forgetting others, but it's a large team of folks that get together to try to address homelessness and the opioid epidemic in Lowell has been very successful. We've been able to expand the co-op team using the ARPA money. That is something that we're wrestling with now because of the success we've seen in those federal dollars, and trying to identify other federal resources that may be available either through, I can't think of the name of the grant that HHS gets. Well, anyways, there are other grants that are available. No, that's not the one. Yeah, FRCAR, yeah, FRCARA, that are available to communities to supplement the loss of ARPA. The other major sort of source of revenue that we're examining to help offset some of these concerns is the opioid mitigation payments. And so Lowell, as well as many other communities throughout Massachusetts and throughout the country, were parties to a class action lawsuit to some of the major pharmaceutical companies who settled in various different cases, claims in their role in the opioid epidemic. And so part of that was payments that are being made to the city. And the council, in their wisdom, set up a special purpose stabilization fund for these monies. And so they're set aside and classified separately so they don't get mixed into the general fund like other monies do. But we have them in reserve and can use them for certain programs, such as the co-op, or they could be used for, if the city wanted to invest in a facility, treatment, or wanted to invest in programming. These are funds that we could look to fund those programs or capital needs, et cetera. The director of HHS, Lisa Golden, has been working with her team and trying to determine what is the best use of the funds. We've tried to engage the opioid task force as well as the homelessness committee to try to get their input. But that's the very reason why we're here with you all, is to try to get some ideas for what are the best use of these resources, what are the programs that you see every day that you think are the most important. I don't expect that anyone came down here with a program they'd like to see cut. That would be a first in my experience, that anybody came down to City Hall for that purpose. But I do expect that there are many of you, either here or at home, who have programs that are an important part of your life. And we want to know about those. We want to know what that means to you, or what that might mean if it is not there, so that we can save it if we can, and if not, try to make accommodations either with our nonprofit partners or other members of the community to try to still address that need. So I hope that answers the question. Please, Counselor.
Thanks. Belinda Duran. The video mentioned that the city will be losing revenue because of changes from the Cannabis Control Commission
Yes.
to the host community agreements. So I'm curious how much money we had been getting and what the changes are and how that will impact us.
Great question. Thank you very much. And it's the hit to the budget's about $1 million, give or take. And it's not insignificant, but to describe that in a little more detail, when recreational cannabis was legalized in Massachusetts, the Cannabis Control Commission, which is the regulatory agency that controls all of the rules related to these businesses, how they operate, et cetera, required each dispensary, recreational dispensary, because there were medical dispensaries first, and then there were recreational dispensaries second. In order to open their doors, they had to negotiate with the host community a host community agreement. And as part of that, as a matter of contract negotiation between the individual business and each community, certain payments were made that were intended, and there was a court case that happened later, intended to offset or mitigate certain impacts to the community. Now, when and I was here at the time, but there was a lot of concern before the businesses opened their doors that they would have a significant social impact, number one, or number two, a more pragmatic impact to traffic, maybe police or fire, et cetera. Some of the not just the recreational dispensaries, but the cultivation businesses, which are a component of the same industry, but they're the places where they grow the product. Some of the risks that they may present, whether it's risks to fire safety, you can imagine these are places that have a very heavy power load. There's a lot of electrical equipment where they operate, and so there may be an impact to the community, et cetera, et cetera. And so Lowell, like all of our communities and this was on a ballot referendum, and Lowell was a yes community. Some were not, but many communities throughout the Commonwealth allowed these businesses to open their doors. There were payments made every year by each one that was open that was calculated as a percentage of their gross sales. So, every quarter, the various locations in Lowell would calculate their gross sales and would send a check to the city. So fast forward several years, the businesses took the case to the Cannabis Control Commission and maybe the courts, and those payments, because of, to be perfectly frank, what other communities may have been done, and Lowell was not the case. This was not the case in Lowell, but other communities took some liberties with those contracts and what the payments were for. And so the courts ruled that you can't do that anymore. And so, we, prior to the sort of implementation date, reduced our estimates to try to wean off that $1 million, but it is a hit to our bottom line. We are not estimating any next year. And so we do have to make up that revenue, number one. And then the other, while I'm sort of on a roll here, the other major loss of revenue that we're seeing is, again, related to ARPA, and that's the loss of investment income. And that is, in a couple of parts, the reason for that. Number one, changes in, sort of just the rate environment. It's not quite as advantageous for the city to have money in the bank, so the amount we're earning on it isn't quite as beneficial as it was. But also our cash balance has come down a little bit because of that $76 million we were sitting on from the federal government. So, and to talk through that a little bit more, when the city manager came, we had already accepted the $76 million from the federal government, but the council urged the manager to further engage the public as to how these funds should be used. And so, the manager, myself, Mr. Ball, the ARPA team, we went out into the community. We did a series of public listening sessions, very similar to this. There was a lot of really great ideas, and it caused us to sort of pivot and change direction a little bit about how that $76 million would be spent. Now, that period of time, we had all that money in the bank, and so we were earning a lot of interest on it. And that because of the rules of the Treasury rules, the interest earned on those funds was a general fund receipt. And so we were able to use that revenue for any general purpose. But because we have now spent that money on these very important projects, these neighborhood park improvement projects, the historic investment in our fire apparatus, the Douglas Road storage tank project, et cetera, all incredibly historic investments in Lowell, the money's gone. And so the interest we were earning on that balance in the bank is less. We do still, don't get me wrong, we still have a healthy cash balance in the bank, but we have to right-size our expectations for revenue for next year. And so that is, it's impactful on the budget. So, are we doing on time? Okay, I'd be happy to answer any more questions. Please, if you wouldn't mind, step into the microphone.
So one of the things that I wanted to ask about is the Proposition 2.5. And this, it says that that's the minimum, but the maximum could be up to 5%. Now, that comes from the real estate taxes, affects the real estate taxes, is that?
Sure, and if it's okay, we can sort of have a back and forth here. So it comes from real estate and personal property, with both make up the levy, and if folks don't know that term, personal property, those are things that are not attached or bolted to the ground. So if you think of a business, if it's a bakery, maybe the ovens, or a lawyer's office, maybe it's the computers and fax machines. Those are taxed at the commercial rate. That's personal property. But mostly it's real estate and personal real estate taxes related to the value on real property.
Okay.
Those are the things that are subject to the Prop 2.5 limits.
Okay, so what you already did is for fiscal 2026, so now we're talking about 2027.
We're talking about 2027, and I think the point you're referencing in the presentation is our expectation for the increase in taxes for next year. So
Yes.
it is our expectation that an absolute minimum would be 2.5% year over year. Now, well, I'll come back to this. The maximum, so we're trying to set guardrails here. The maximum would be a 5% increase to the levy, and that includes both personal property and real estate. Now, we'll call it a 4% increase in the levy. Doesn't mean that everybody's individual tax bill will go up by 4% or not. And that's because of, if you'll allow me, I'll get into the details a little bit. So property taxes in Massachusetts are set by state law. We approach them, it's an ad valorem tax, meaning we tax the property based on the value, ad valorem according to the value. So every home, every business is taxed based on its value, and the formula is the value divided by 1,000 times the tax rate, which the rate is what we set with the Department of Revenue each year. But each individual tax bill is based on the value of your house, and that is a component that is somewhat outside of the control of the city. It's a subject to market forces because of the way we have to assess real estate in Massachusetts is based on certain appraisal standards set by professional standards as well as by state law. So I'm giving more information than your question was looking for, but I hope that's.
Yeah. So the 2.5 is set by law, and any increase up to the 5% is set by whom?
Well, it's the city manager that proposes the budget to the council, and so I think I understand what you're asking. The council approves the expenditures with the budget in the spring. The actual tax rate is set in the fall. And so if you think about it this way, so the budget cycle begins in the spring. We bring together, as the video sort of tried to demonstrate, all of the expenditures, try to meet all of those expenditures with our revenue, and then a budget is presented to the council for approval, or or they can reduce the line items, et cetera. And there is a proposed tax levy included in that budget. And so when the council approves the budget, they're approving the expenditures. And what happens later in the fall, when the real estate values are set, we go to the Department of Revenue, and that's when we get the tax rate. So it's sort of it's a cyclical process that happens year round, with the budget and the expenditure part in the spring, and then the tax levy revenue part in the fall. But the limitations I was speaking of, so 2.5% is not like a legal minimum. There is a maximum, and it depends on a community's specific circumstances. So now I feel like I'm not answering your question, but
what I really want to know is how can you stop increasing my real estate taxes?
understand. Yeah, I kind of
really
figured
wanna
that's where
know.
we were going. I guess what I would offer that may not be helpful and may not answer your question is, because this has happened in Lowell before, we could not increase the levy and an individual's property taxes could still go up because of the value, even if the levy were the same from year to year. And so because of these two forces happening each year in the budget, it's very difficult for an administration or a council or, in a town meeting, et cetera, to ever try to, from one year to the next, manage for any or all properties not to have an increase. But it also would be a very difficult budgetary exercise because the price of poker goes up every year for us. And so because of these fixed costs that we described in the video, our pension cost is going up next year, health insurance, debt service, the cost of employees, labor goes up. We have 17 labor unions on the city side. That doesn't include teachers or any of the other unions on the school side. We have a collective bargaining agreement in place with those unions right now. It calls for a 2% increase in wages for next year. So the cost of labor is going up by 2% next year. And those are costs we have to meet. And then thereafter, we will negotiate with those labor unions for successor contracts. So I see that the city manager has joined us again, just in time. Yeah, no.
I'm living on fixed income.
I understand.
So more money is going out the door than coming in.
I understand, and
I'm just here to.
your point is well taken, and I guess I will offer, some information to try to address that. There are programs in the city through the assessor's office. There are exemptions.
I would tell you we tried that over income.
Okay. So, well, for,
Try to put it back in.
sure.
I'm sorry.
No, please, I welcome your feedback. But there are, for the folks at home that may be listening, we are very empathetic towards folks that may struggle to meet their tax obligations. But there are certain statutory exemptions that exist in Massachusetts. If you're a veteran, if you are a disabled veteran, there's an additional exemption available. There are certain income-based exemptions that are available, although there are income guidelines attached to those. Anybody who may be interested in finding out about those things, I would encourage them to contact the assessor's office. Our assessor, Miss Ellen Bordeaux, is one of the best in the business, 978-674-4200. Give her office a call. If there is something available to you, she'll help you find it, and she'll help you apply for that, or her staff, of course. The other thing is, maybe it's possible we got it wrong. If you have a problem with the value of your home, if you believe that the assessed value is not accurate, please let us know. That is something, there is a specific window for which you can file for an abatement, and that is the process. And these are all things that are set by law, so the rules and regulations for them we don't have control over, although we administer them locally. So if you believe that the value of your property is not accurate, your opportunity is after the issuance of the third quarter tax bill, which happens right after the first of the calendar year, and then you have until the beginning of February to come down to the assessor's office or give them a call. There's a form that's available online, and maybe there was a mistake or an error that they can address. So that I hope that helps on the real estate side. Also, with motor vehicle excise, that's another tax where there are similar provisions, exemptions, et cetera. One of the things we get all the time is if you transfer plates, you shouldn't be responsible for both vehicles in that year. So, well, some people don't know that and they end up paying 2 times for it, which is not necessary. Please come down to the assessor's office. You need to have certain documentation, but we can issue you a refund if you've paid twice, et cetera. One important note as it relates to abatements for real or personal property, you have to pay the tax before you abate it. And then we will issue you a refund if the abatement is granted by the Board of Assessors. But again, this is all stuff that's set by state law. It's not something that we have a whole heck of a lot of control over, but we will work with any member of the community that has questions. So.
The assessor's office is great. I've been there.
I agree.
Really great, so.
I agree. But thank you again for your input. Mr. Ferrier, did you have another question?
Yeah, just a quick question. First of all, I want to say thank you. The detail that you provide is always phenomenal, and
Thank you.
You know what you're talking about. My question is around a preparatory for the session in 2 weeks pertaining to debt. Would your office be able to bring to the listening session 2 things? One would be a waterfall amortization of what our current debt structure looks like and kind of when we're going to see some relief in that overall debt burden to be able to improve capital budgets. And secondly, would you be able to bring a list of the FY22 to FY26 capital budget approvals and what has been encumbered to date? Because I'm sure we haven't encumbered everything, or maybe plans have changed and we aren't going to. So it'd be really cool to see that.
We'd be happy to. Mr. Ferrier, I'm not sure that everybody would be as interested in that as you and I, but I would be happy.
You could be right.
Yeah, I would be happy to discuss it. And I hope that there are members of the public out there that find it as interesting as Mr. Ball, myself, and you, Mr. Ferrier. It did remind me of, so happy to do that during the debt discussion. One thing that may be worthy to point out in a general topical session is that the general fund pays the debt service for most things, but not for the debt related to capital improvements of the business-like activities, or, we call them enterprise funds more colloquially, but those in Lowell, we operate 3 enterprise funds for the utilities and the parking enterprise. So there is an enterprise fund for the water utility, the wastewater utility or sewer, and then the parking enterprise. So the debt service related to the manager is indicating to me that we are contemplating a 4th one for solid waste and recycling. That is something that we're working on and likely will be proposing to the council in the coming weeks. The purpose of those is so that those operate like a business, where the fee, so your water fee, you think about it like this, your water fee, your sewer fee, the rates for the garages, and hypothetically the trash fee are set sufficient to cover the entire cost of the operation, including the debt. And so, it's more straightforward for things like the parking garage. So the debt service related to capital improvements on building all of the garages, the building for the most recent garage that was constructed in the Hamilton Canal Innovation District, as well as the capital improvements, the capital equipment purchase for the kiosks that was made recently, the Flowbirds that are out there now. But in water and sewer, things like the pipes underground, improvements to the facilities, the debt service related to those capital is funded by the enterprise fund. And so your taxes don't go to support, I say this about water and sewer because there is a subsidy that exists currently for the parking enterprise, but the purpose of that is to make them self-sufficient. And so it's worth noting that we will bring those separately and show them separately, but there are amortization schedules for water and sewer as well. So we are just about out of time. I, again, want to thank everybody so much for joining us. We look forward to the next session, but if anybody wants to contact us via email, offline, we look forward to seeing you and members of the public at the next one. We'd be happy to take, at the next one in 2 weeks. We'll see you then. Thank you very much and have a good evening.